Hi guys, it's Neppy. Thank you for joining me once again. As you guys know, I am a Christian urban apologist. My mission is to help you feel secure in your Christianity while being Black, and to help you feel secure in your Blackness while being Christian. On this episode of Christian Black Woke, we're going to discuss the fact that race is a social construct, but I'm still Black though. In future episodes, we'll discuss either one of the three elements of being Christian, Black, and woke, whether it's issues relating specifically to Christianity, specifically to Blackness, specifically to being woke, the intersection of all three, or just either one in isolation. But today, we're going to focus on what it means to be Black. So let's start off with, who is Black? Are these people Black?
Now, with that Instagram model under fire, accused of pretending to be Black to get followers and endorsements.
As far as Captain Carr, she loves to call me a Latin male. I'm a Black male. Yes, I am.
When did you have this, coming with God moment that you were Black? When did God tell you that?
Well, I learned that there's people in my family that are mixed and that are Black.
I see.
Let's not talk about the degree of Blackness.
Oh, no, you're Blacker than me. That's obvious.
I want everybody to take a look at a photo of my next guest, Martina, when she was a young teen. Now, at this age, Martina desperately wanted to look like Pamela Anderson. So after 10 years and several cosmetic surgeries, Martina transformed her looks into this. But she wasn't done. 6 months ago, Martina made worldwide headlines with her most shocking transformation yet. Through chemical injections and body modification, Martina now considers herself a Black woman. Here's her story.
Are you an African-American woman?
I identify as Black.
You identify as Black. Let me put a picture up of you in your early 20s, though. And when you see this picture, is this an African-American woman, or is that a Caucasian woman?
I would say that visibly she would be identified as white by people who see her.
But at the time, were you identifying yourself as African-American?
In that picture, during that time, no.
Okay, so I think most of us will probably look at these people and say, y'all ain't Black. You can call yourself Black. You can say you're Black. You can say one drop rule Black. But does that make you Black? Now, what about people who we do think are Black, but then turn around and say that they're not Black?
Now, it all started when a tweeter asked Sean Hillary or Trump, and he responded, I don't really care, because after I learned what I learned about politics, I just stay away. Let down. Another tweeter wrote, you should care based on the fact that your ancestors died so that you could have the right to vote. Bow Wow then ruffles even more feathers by responding, man, I only believe what the eye see. I'm mixed. I don't know what my ancestors was doing. I only know what I see. But wait, there's more. So another tweeter wrote, you don't know what your ancestors were doing? Did your eyes see a movie called Selma? And Bow Wow responded, yeah, I seen Selma. Was I related to anyone? No. I'm saying my mom's side of my family is not Black. Heritage different.
So Bow Wow isn't Black. Tiger Woods isn't Black. But that time he got arrested, he was classified as Black. Raven Simone is Black, but she's not African-American, because she says we've been here so long, how long it take to be American? If they American, we American. They, of course, being white people who she says she prefers to call European-American. I tend to agree, and that's also what I call them. I do not like saying the phrase white people. For some reason, it feels weird in my mouth, so I call them European-American. I actually had someone get offended because I called them a European-American. But your ancestors from Europe, though. Then we have this lovely young lady.
People try to tell me I'm an African American, but that's not true. African Americans are loud, rude, obnoxious, and just altogether fat and ugly.
If you ask me, my 16-year-old daughter has a very out-of-control identity crisis. She truly believes she's white.
She's not Black or African American. She's white. What about these people who have, babies who, one parent might be white, the other one might be Black, and then the babies, the twins, come out two different colors from the same womb at the same time, and the babies are apparently to the eye, two different races. Then we have this baby here who genetically both of her parents are African and straight up Black, but yet she looked white. There is a common known aversion to blackness when it comes to people of the Caribbean, particularly in the Dominican Republic.
I am not black, honey. I'm not black, I'm just Dominican.
A lot of people think I'm black, but I'm not black, and my daddy Dominican.
Although I will say now that they are strongly embracing their African roots, and you'll see that a lot of them are starting to shed this whole ideology of being Dominican, not black, but Dominican and black. But as an aside, here's Godfrey with some comic relief regarding this subject.
I know black, I know black, I know black. Imposible, I know black. I'm Dominican, I'm Puerto Rican, I know black. Be looking just like me. Be having the same hair. I be touching it like, it's not the same, it's not the same. It's not the same, papi. It's not, be like, no, it's not the same. I know black. Negro, nunca, nunca. I know, no, nunca. I know black. I'm like, no, you black. No, no, no. I know black. Dominica. I go, I know, but you're black. No, 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 papi. I know black. No, no, black, black, black.
Then we have the fact that Kanye West is clearly black, but black people don't want to call him black because he doesn't align himself with what most black people think are black people's interests. Kind of strange, but when you Google Uncle Ruckus, here's what you get. Awkward. Black has many definitions. Whether these people are black or not, black has many definitions.
So what are you taking me to see?
We are going to see the casta paintings.
The casta paintings.
By the end of the 17th century, interracial relationships were on the rise. The Catholic Church allowed marriage between all groups. The law granted freedom to the children of black slaves and indigenous women. White men increasingly impregnated black women.
They always begin with Spanish and Indian, that it makes mestizo.
All right.
Then mestizo and Spanish castiza.
Castiza.
The third one is castiza and Spanish, makes Spanish.
Maria Elisa Velasquez is a professor of history and anthropology. These 18th century casta paintings were painted to show Europeans the diversity of the people here. These 16 images are a sort of an anthropological cookbook, showing the results of mixing the genes of black people, brown people, and white people.
They need pseudo-scientific reasons to explain why some cultures will be inferior, and you have to make them slaves.
And they found it.
They found it.
16 shades of blackness.
Yes.
So here we have all type of people. Now, in America, if your ancestor or one of your ancestors or one of your recent ancestors was black, you black. And as a side note, by that definition, Jesus was black. Moving on, I'd like to remind you once again that race is a social construct. What does that mean? What does social construct mean? It is defined as an idea that has been created and accepted by people in a society. Think of a building, construction. It was built. They created it and we all accepted it. Who is they? Who created this classification of race? So there's an individual by the name of Gomez Zurara who in the early 1400s created this classification when describing his voyages, his expeditions to West Africa. In 1440, a guy named Nino Tristão grabbed a bunch of Africans and took them back to Portugal to show off to the king and said, look what I got here. And there begins the transatlantic slave trade. In an effort to continue trading in human flesh while silencing their consciences, they went ahead and created a classification system to deem black people as less than human. And this guy here, Gomez Zurara, in the early 1400s, is quoted as saying that the captured Africans had lived like beasts without any custom of reasonable beings and only knew to live in bestial sloth. In other words, they were lazy animals. Once enslaved, their souls could then be saved and their lives be improved. And so here begins the connection between trying to find justification for race, trying to find justification for slavery and religion being used as that justification. Christianity had been in existence for, this is 1440, so approximately 1500 years prior to this connection between slavery and its justification on a basis of race, with saying that God had created men in that way, that God had created classes of men, species of men, races of men, in that he deemed it appropriate for some to hold others captive. Now, again, this is 1500 years into Christianity when these two ideologies are intertwined, perverting and using Christianity to substantiate and validate the trade that they were engaged in because their consciences were burning them. You can't just feel comfortable picking up people and selling them off and not have some sort of consciousness about that, not have some sort of guilt surrounding that. So that was in the 1440s. This begins the whole idea that Black people are less than. And then let's talk about that for a minute, because prior to this, we didn't necessarily have this ideology of being a monolithic group of people. We weren't just one homogenous group. Black people did not see themselves as Black people. Black people did not, we were not Pan-Africanists prior to colonialism, prior to slavery. We were tribal and we were ethnic and we were national, just like every other indigenous group on the planet. Even in Europe, there were tribes of people who would fight against each other, and they were all, you know, by today's vernacular, white. They didn't necessarily see themselves as one group of people. We'll fast forward to the United States, and after this new world was discovered and all that, when the Italians first started coming to the United States, they were not seen as American. They were not accepted. They were discriminated against because they were other, until they finally began to be accepted in this group known as white. And so we have the same issue in Africa, where Pan-Africanism, I believe, is a necessity, a cultural necessity now as a result of the invention of race. But prior to that, what we had was family groups, clans, tribes, and etc. And that's how we identified. So there wasn't this one idea that we're all African. We decided that we needed to stick together and see ourselves that way as a result of that, what was happening. So then we have in the 1700s a fellow by the name of Blumenbach, who lived from 1752 to 1840, and his research in the measurement of craniums, or skulls, led him to divide mankind into 5 great families. We have Caucasian, Mongolian, Malayan, Ethiopian, and American. Now, he was a German anthropologist. He classified human beings into 5 different races. Then we have Linnaeus in a series of publications from 1735 to 1759, where he classified then known animal forms, right? But he also included humans with primates. And he established the use of both genus and species as terms for identification of all animals. So he's the guy that introduced the term Homo sapiens. But he also listed 4 major subdivisions of the species Homo sapiens, which we still go by the title today. And they are Homo americanus, Homo africanus, Homo europaeus, Homo asiaticus. And then to take it a step further, he acknowledged also that there was Homo monstruosus, which were many exotic peoples, and Homo ferus. Think of feral cat, wild human beings, right? So lest we think that this idea is foreign and not widely accepted, let's move on to somebody who was a little bit more popular. You may recognize this title, On the Origin of Species by Natural Selection, by the one and only Charles Darwin. Well, the original title to that work was On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle of Life. Now, Charles Darwin believed that evolution shaped humanity. And he wrote a book after The Origin of Species entitled The Descent of Man. In this book, he theorized that human beings, having evolved from apes, continued evolving as various races, with some races more developed than others. He classified the white race as more advanced than the lower organisms, such as pygmies. How interesting is that? And different people groups were called savage or low and degraded. So racism and scientific arguments for racism had been common prior to that time, but they were definitely far more accelerated after Darwin and his theory on the species of races in men. Remember that we said race is a social construct. So these people, as I stated, basically created race in order to justify slavery. And when I say the chicken or the egg, some people have an argument as to whether slavery caused racism or racism caused slavery. To me, they're intertwined, and it really doesn't even matter, because whether or not racism preceded slavery, which we don't really have much historical evidence for, they had, there's always been discrimination, because as long as there's going to be sin, there's going to be discrimination. So people found ways to discriminate against each other, and it was based on tribe or climate or where they were from. And here now we simply have used skin tone to massively classify a large group of people, or diverse groups of people, into one large lump. So whether slavery preceded racism or racism preceded slavery, it really doesn't matter, because racism and the classification of men as lower races than others, with the European being on top, was used to validate and substantiate and silence the conscience of people who were engaging in the slave trade. Now, remember, again, once again, race is a social construct, and it is an idea that is created and accepted. So because it is accepted, it is a functional reality. It may be a theory in terms of the genetic variations between people in one race and another race may not be that dissimilar. There may not be that many variations. In other words, because you look different doesn't mean that you are so broadly genetically different. But nevertheless, it has been accepted, and it applies to society, and it applies to, well, let's just take a look at a couple of examples. We have discrimination, right? Which, again, I said discrimination has existed since the beginning of whenever, and people discriminate for a variety of reasons. But in this society that we live in, discrimination by reason of race, or as we also call it, racism, is very real. We have the criminal justice system, which penalizes Black people for being Black. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you take a look at the documentary 13th by Ava DuVernay. And then we have inequity in education, where there is definitely a disparity between the races when it comes to education and the educational system here in the United States. I suggest we listen to the song Black Rage by Lauryn Hill. There is a version of it on YouTube which adds images to the video that weren't in the original, but it definitely allows you to make more sense of what's going on. So I'll put a link to that. Then we have housing discrimination. We've got medical treatment, and the fact that people believe that African Americans are somehow superhuman and stronger, and therefore do not need to be treated medically with as much urgency as other people. And we've had plenty of African Americans, Black folk, dying in ERs or leaving the ER and dying, one just as recently as last week, because of this very thing, because they believe that we're somehow stronger and we don't feel pain. We're not human like them. Right? Then we have police brutality, which we can go back and forth on ad nauseum. Then there was the counterintelligence program by the FBI, which was instituted specifically to keep Black people from unifying, and what I guess the justification they would use is trying to take over the United States. But that's a whole conversation for an entirely different video. Nevertheless, we just celebrated Martin Luther King, who was assassinated even though he was completely dedicated to nonviolence. So he wasn't seeking an overthrow, he was simply seeking equality. Nevertheless, he was murdered, and then later they created this holiday in his honor, which is completely morbid if you ask me. Then we had the KKK, which started right after emancipation in response to emancipation. So they saw Black people being released from slavery, and they said, oh no, baby, you ain't taking over here. And then they began to terrorize, voter intimidation, lynching, burning down people's houses, all of these things based on what? Race, the social construct that they have created and accepted, right? Then we have racial cleansing, the racial cleansing, which is basically like white flight of neighborhoods. We have the burning of Black Wall Street. Then there's gentrification. There's also the fact, so some people, for example, say, well, there's racism no longer exists because we have examples of so many professional African Americans, so many professional Black people who are making strides and advancements and progressing. And if racism were truly holding a people down, then we wouldn't have these examples. Well, I am a professional. I have attended graduate school. I have a law degree, and I can tell you that my law degree does not strip me or make me somehow impenetrable to racism, baby. People still see me as a Black attorney before they see me as an attorney. In fact, the American Bar Association released a survey which indicated that Black people are the least likely to find jobs in a law firm than any other minority. Just Google lawyers. Just look at the makeup of of the most prominent law firms and you're going to see what they look like, and they don't include a lot of diversity. It's one of the least diverse fields there are. So I just say that in response to this whole become a professional and go to school and so racism doesn't exist. That's just not true. And each one of these things I've mentioned, racism, in the criminal justice system, in education, in housing discrimination, medical treatment, we've got the food disparities. I could go on, and each one of those things could be a video in itself, and maybe I will do a video on those things, you know, being Christian, Black, woke, and all. So realizing that race is a social construct, why would I still call myself Black if race is fake, right? If they made it up? Well, I just explained to you that even though it's a social construct and it is a theory, it's something that was invented in the minds of men, it still is a very serious force in operation. And as an attorney, and I don't even have to be an attorney, just being a human being and being someone who grew up in an urban area, I've seen firsthand and secondhand the issues that arise as a result of being Black, as a result of being physically identified. Look at Tiger Woods. He denounced being Black. I am not Black. I am a whole mixture of different things, and I don't want you to call me Black. But yet society, which has created this construct, projects upon him and includes him in this group classification as Black. Me, I define myself as Pan-African, and there are a variety of ideologies as it relates to Pan-Africanism. There are a variety of extremes, just like there are a variety of extremes with any ideology. I am not just pro-Black. I am pro-oppressed people, so I'd like to state that first. But my family is most definitely of African descent, and so I identify as Black. For me, Pan-Africanism is simply recognizing that people in the diaspora, people who have been shipped off away from Africa or who have migrated out of Africa, one of the two, are African descendants, and therefore we are all related. Now, an entirely different conversation could arise from that because there is the theory as it relates to how human beings evolved. And I don't believe in evolution. So let me just say that off rip. I believe 100% in the Bible. So the Bible says that God created man in his own image. I did not come from no monkey. That's y'all business. You feel me? But then there's the out of Africa theory, which basically states that wherever human beings, whatever they were before Homo sapien, we evolved into Homo sapien in Africa, and then from Africa, out of Africa, we spread throughout the world, and that's how we populated the world. Then there's another theory called the multi-regional theory, which basically states that the pre-human form, pre-Homo sapien, was already all across the earth, and then they individually evolved. And so the reason I brought that up was because at some level, depending on how far back you go, everybody African, everybody Black. So I'm gonna just take a few seconds to address that. So basically the theory is that as people move to different climates, say for example, you leave, let's call it like the Ethiopia region, and you head north, and you head northwest, and you land in Europe. Well, in Europe, there's not as much sun, and so you lose some of your melanin. The air is colder there, so you don't need broad nostrils. Your nostrils begin to thin to prevent the cold air from going to your brain. This is all theory. Because you've lost your melanin, your hair turns to a lighter color. Your eyes also turn lighter colors. Your hair thins out as no longer requires the absorption of sweat to keep your head cool. And all of these things are supposedly a result of migration. And so it's very superficial, very superficial. If it's simply a matter of adjusting to climate, then the difference between myself and a European isn't all that great. Take the Arctic fox, for example. There's a fox that is white in the winter and brown in the summer. It's the same fox, baby. It adapts to its climate and then back again. And there are several animals that do this, that will have white fur so that they can blend in with the snow, and then have brown fur so they can blend in with the foliage when the time is right. And so this whole idea of race is, like I said, it's a social construct. But why then do I continue to call myself Black? Here's a quote from a resolution of assembled free Blacks at Bethel AME Church in Philadelphia, January 15th, 1817. The quote states, "Whereas our ancestors, not of choice, were the first successful cultivators of the wilds of America, we, their descendants, feel ourselves entitled to participate in the blessings of her luxuriant soil. We will never separate ourselves voluntarily from the slave population of this country. They are our brethren by the ties of consanguinity and suffering and of wrong." So basically, we're family. We're family, and I am not going to separate myself from those who are likely situated as me on the basis of, so they were basically saying, you know, we're free and they're slaves, but we're still one. And my thing is, we are, again, situated in a place where I could classify myself as whatever I want to classify myself as, but you cannot make up your own rules to this game. The same way, you know, certain jobs you can't get unless you go to school, and some people say, well, this is just a piece of paper. You know, why do I need a degree? Okay, well, go ahead and try to apply for that job and see if you're going to get that job if you don't get the degree. The game was not constructed by you. The game was not programmed by you. So if you want to play, you have to go according to the program. So I operate on both levels, knowing full well that God created all men of one blood. Right? Of one blood. I do not discriminate on basis of race, religion, no, anything like that. No, we are all family. We're all human beings. Nevertheless, I am still forced to operate in the reality of what it means to be a Black person, a Black woman in today's society. And so I'm still going to identify as Black, and I embrace that, because for me, Blackness means of African descent. That's basically what it is. I am of African descent. My mother's family is Afro-Cuban. My father's father was a self-proclaimed South Carolina Geechee boy. And so it's African on both sides. And for me, I cannot separate myself from my culture in that sense. It doesn't make sense, and we'll talk about this in future videos, it doesn't make sense for someone to tell you that you have to shed your Blackness in order to be accepted in any arena. Because to be honest with you, as Trick Daddy said, you still an N-word. As Jay-Z said, you still an N-word. So it doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter how eloquently you speak. It doesn't matter how properly you dress. It doesn't matter how well you assimilate into this culture. You's a Black person, baby. And so I accept that, because to me, it transcends more than just saying, I accept the label that they've given me. No. I accept what that label indicates. It indicates and it functions in a way to say that I am a family member. I am a part of this family, this culture that suffers the same sufferings and that enjoys the same fruits as well. There is more to being Black than just oppression, baby. I love me some black eyed peas and grits and all of that. Yes, it's more than just food and it's more than just music, but it definitely includes those things. It includes the vernacular. It includes, you know, I look at memes on social media. I once sent my mom one where it talks about a mother talking to her kids at a family gathering and says, y'all better eat now because I ain't cooking when we get home. And my mom's response was, who was watching me? And social media has allowed me to see that so many of my childhood experiences were cultural, whereas I would have thought it was more of like a household thing. Like, that's my mom. Who trained all these parents to say the same things and think the same way? It's our culture. It's a part of who we are. And I embrace that and I accept that and I love it. I loves it. And I take issue with anybody telling me that I shouldn't. I take issue with anybody telling me that I should shed it or that it is somehow unchristlike to identify as an African American, an African descendant, or a Black woman. So again, these are just things that, you know, if we stick to what the Bible has to say and the fact that all men are born of one family, then we can realize and recognize that we are, you know, one race. But I don't take that so far as to say, you know, the verse says that in Christ there is neither a Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. And what that's basically saying is we don't make divisions between ourselves or become a respecter of persons based on those things. But that doesn't mean we get rid of those titles. The same people who will tell you that you should not call yourself or identify as Black because it is divisive will turn around and then say, we'll turn around and then have a huge problem if you decided that you didn't want to be, that you wanted to be a non-binary person, that gender doesn't exist, that I'm not a man nor a woman, I just whatever I feel like being that day. They would definitely have a problem with that. And so that is not what Christ was saying. He was saying that we should not treat each other any differently based on those classifications. So in conclusion, I would just like to leave you with these thoughts that once again, race, yes, is a social construct. It's a building that was created and it was accepted. And we've been dwelling in this building for approximately what? 400 or 500 years now. Can I count? 600 years. And I do believe that there can be a reversal of it. I don't think that saying I don't see color is the appropriate avenue to do so. But because we live in this structure, because we live in this society which operates by way of race, I cannot escape my Blackness and I won't run from it. Stay Christian, stay Black, stay woke.